Welcome to the Fieldhouse Podcast, episode 2. It is Wednesday, February 7th. We are recording this. I am here with Brian Hamilton this week. Brian, how's it going, man?
Going good, Sam. I was just in Arizona for a few days, and now I'm back in the Arctic dystopian wasteland of Chicago with slight difference, but...
Did your body just like freeze upon getting back to Chicago? Because I would imagine that's what mine would do.
You know, I was having this conversation with another Arizona resident earlier today, and it is amazing how the places just look different and how your eyes have to adjust differently going from anywhere else to Arizona or vice versa. It is just it's sort of hard to believe that places exist in the same country, let alone the same continent, let alone the same planet, basically. But we've layered. I've layered up.
Well, like
got layers.
That, like your eyes have to adjust not only to, because like in Arizona, and I think you were in Phoenix, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
It's
Phoenix area.
There's like a softness to it, right? Because the sun kind of beats down and it's brown because of the dirt, like the lack of grass in many places. And then you look at Chicago, it's so bright because everything reflects off of the buildings. Everything reflects off of the snow. Your eyes are just totally a mess.
Right.
And then speaking of snow, your kid is going to hockey practice, and God damn it, I respect that, Brian Hamilton.
You know what though? Here's the thing. It's floor hockey, so he'll actually be on a basketball court. That's just running around with a stick in his hand, whacking away at a ball, and probably like hurting himself or other fellow kindergarten or first graders.
Teach your kid hockey.
We'll be in a rink. He's not on skates. He's not on skates. He's not not at the rink or anything like that. We got him in there for floor hockey just to get some of those, get that energy.
Not only am I a fan of hockey, but The Athletic is a fan of hockey, clearly, given the investment that we have made in the sport. I respect this so
covered
much.
3 Stanley Cup finals, my man.
Yeah.
So,
and Brian, I love that hockey too. You covered the Blackhawks throughout all of those runs. I mean, God bless you.
That's
I think the Blackhawks suck, like as a Penguins fan, but hey, good for you.
I was on the ice after each time. Each time we won, I was on the ice afterwards. It's been pretty good. Pretty good run. Not so good now, but pretty good before.
Let's get into the college basketball stuff. Today on this episode, we are going to just kind of give a little preview of what we think the all-conference teams in each of the 6 high major leagues as well as the AAC looks like right now. These are certainly by no means finalized. We still have a full month of the season, but we thought that it would be at least an interesting concept to kind of talk about a wide variety of players and kind of cast a wide net so that we could talk about a lot of different teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
let's do it.
We're going to start in the Big East because I think the Big East probably has the most insane all conference race I've ever seen. Did you you went through this and you looked at it? How many players did you come up with that like you thought, okay, this guy has a very real case to be on the first team?
Is it that insane? I guess so.
Okay. So here on my first team, I do not have all of these guys. I do not have Marcus Foster. I do not have Kyrie Thomas. I do not have Shamori Pons or Keelan Martin. I don't have Kai Cartwright.
Yeah, the Keelan Martin one is interesting to me. That's striking.
Yeah, and Marcus Foster too. They're both averaging like 20 points a game.
Right. So what? It's got to be. You got to have Marcus Howard.
I do.
Trevon.
I do.
Obviously, yes. Brunson.
Yep.
Let's see. Then you're Angel, I would assume. Delgado.
I have Delgado, yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's 4. It's like a guessing game here. I get it. Bridges?
Yeah. I have Mikal Bridges. Those are my 5.
I mean, you're right. I mean, that's a pretty strong second team. I guess there really isn't a spot there for Keelan Martin.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how you could make an argument other than the fact that he can just light it up and get you a bunch of points at any given time. I don't know how you make an argument for him over any of the other guys.
Yeah,
top five.
I would say that Marcus Foster was probably the toughest one for me to leave off. He's been ridiculous this season. Like, he has been totally outrageous. He's averaging, like I said, 20 points a game, 3 assists, 3 rebounds on 50% shooting, 44% from 3, 79.7% from the foul line. That's insane. Like, I don't have Andrew Rousey on this list. Andrew Rousey is averaging 19 points a game on 41% from 3, 90% from the foul line with 4 assists a game. I don't know that Andrew Rousey is on my second team even. That's how crazy this league's race is.
Yeah, but see, I always place a premium on where you finished. You know, what, and when you look at the standings, Marcus Foster has that going for him, right? Creighton, they're not going to win the league, but they're at least in that top half of the league. But, Marquette, not in that top half of the league. Butler, right in that middle mix, so to speak, that sort of jumble in the middle there. I think you have to put a premium on not only what a guy is doing and the numbers he's putting up, but is he helping his team win as well? I think there's got to be a value on that. So the Rousey part, I mean, as we sit here today, Marquette 13-10, 4-7 in the league. I like Andrew Rousey. I think he's a fun player to watch. I think him and Marcus Howard are fun as heck to watch out there on the court. But, I'm not going to sit here and go to bat for Andrew Rousey with a team that's 3 games below 500 in the league. Just not going to do it.
And I think that's what makes it so hard for me to pick Marcus Howard over Marcus Foster, right? But at the end of the day, also I have to consider, what player do I just believe is better? What guy would I rather have on my team? I'd rather have Marcus Howard. And that's not a slight to Marcus Foster, who I think I would legitimately put him on the Pac-12 team if he was in that league. I would put him on the Big 12 team if he was in that league. Certainly the Big 10 team, certainly the ACC, and certainly the SEC too, I think. I think he would be on every other league's all-league team. But because this Big East season is so stacked in terms of players, I just it's hard for me to find a spot, and it's hard for me to, at the end of the day, just be like, oh yeah, this guy, I can't find a spot for him. It's just a really tough conversation to have, really.
Yeah. And I mean, and it might be that just the explosiveness of Marcus Howard is kind of hard to ignore. I mean, we might sort of our eyes might be, bright on the fact that, Marcus Howard is capable, as we've seen, of putting up 50, 60 in a game and just getting completely ridiculous in a way that very few other people in college basketball can get ridiculous. So we might be, I guess that's real, but that's really the only discussion you have here, because I think the success of Xavier and Villanova, those guys deserve their spots. Maybe 4 of those guys we've talked about it's I think pretty hard to argue, any of those guys. I mean, even if you get to the advanced stat stuff, I'm just clicked it around right now because I was wondering, is Marcus Foster more valuable to his team than Marcus Howard's team? They're pretty close. When you go to the advanced stuff like win shares and stuff like that, it's almost like a coin flip at this point. So I guess I wouldn't be surprised, though, at the end of the day. I actually maybe wouldn't be surprised, depending on what happens moving forward for Marquette, if maybe Marcus Howard slides off. It'd be hard for me to see, just because I think of all of that he's accomplished early on. But if Creighton makes a run and Marquette dips a little bit, falls off at the end of the year, then I think you can make it. You can make a trade there and not feel too bad about it. I mean, you listed Marcus Foster's numbers. It's not like anybody in college basketball is just going to sneer at those numbers. So,
no, of course not. And the last thing I want to talk about within this team is, I've contended all season that Jalen Brunson and Mikal Bridges are the two, or are the best 1-2 punch in all of college basketball. I think that Villanova has to have 2 guys on this list because of that. What are your thoughts on the idea of Brunson and Bridges being the best 1-2 punch in the entire country?
That is an interesting question, because they aren't the most explosive guys, right? I mean, they are obviously extremely good, but I don't know. I mean, Alonzo Trier and DeAndre Ayton, That's
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It's kind of good. I mean, you look at the other teams. Virginia doesn't really punch so much as like jab you to death. So I'm not really sure,
Right.
like, if you'd say they'd have a punch. Purdue has so many guys that do so many things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking up and down the list right now. Like,
Grayson Allen kind of fell off, so I can't.
That would be the natural, right? With Bagley. I mean, I think you can certainly make the argument because I don't think anybody else is really, in terms of combination of production and high levels of success. Like, who's Michigan State's 1-2 punch? You know what I mean?
I would say Bridges and Jaren Jackson.
And I mean, again, the way Bridges played last night, like, that's pretty punchy the way he played at Iowa in times last night, especially in the first half. But I mean, in terms of the classic 1-2 punch, I mean, maybe it's Ayton and Trier versus Brunson and Bridges, and that's it. There's your discussion, right?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and move on to the Big Ten because I found the transition there to be relatively easy. On the Big Ten team, do you want to do the prediction thing again, or do you just want me to tell you?
Why don't you tell me this time, and then I will see if I have any peculiarities that come to mind.
I've got Keita Bates-Diop,
sure,
who I think is the player of the year in the league so far. I've got Miles Bridges, who I think is pretty clearly second. The next group of guys I think is tough. I've got Tony Carr, I've got Vince Edwards, and I've got Carson Edwards.
Interesting.
I went with two Purdue guys because I think that Purdue has earned the right to have two guys. Who are names that stand out to you that I should potentially have there?
I wonder. It's a tough league, I think, because it's obviously not a really great league right now.
The haves and have-nots.
Yeah, and so you want to say, all right, who on these teams maybe deserves to be up there? Could you make a case for a Jaren Jackson at this point, just in terms of how he impacts the game on the defensive end, especially for Michigan State? Yep. I mean, you look at plus-minus numbers, you look at defensive win shares and stuff like that. I mean, he's up there with anybody in the country, and I think maybe because there's so much around him, maybe because they don't need to rely on him to go nuts with scoring numbers, he can kind of fade off. But I mean, that's a guy that could be sort of a sneaky pick to get in there. I'll
throw out Cassius Winston to you as well. 69% true shooting percentage, 44% assist rate. Both of those numbers are in the top 10 nationally. Not just in the Big Ten. For me, the problem with Cassius Winston is that I think he's emblematic of Michigan State's biggest problem, which is one of the biggest problems for any other significant contender in the country, and that's their turnover issue. His 24% turnover issue, I think that he tries to do a little bit too much, and that's what holds him back from this level to me. But I think you can certainly make a case for him. Some of the other guys, Jawan Morgan, I think has been tremendous this year. Jordan Murphy was a guy that everyone in the non-conference season had on their All-American team, and now he's not even on my All-Big Ten team. Ethan Happ, James Palmer at Nebraska is now averaging over 17 points a game. It's a good league in terms of talent, but because I decided to default to Purdue getting two guys, given the fact that they are, for me, I mean, just very clearly head and shoulders above anyone in the league right now. That's kind of where I'm at. Like, I felt like I had to leave those guys off.
Yeah, I mean, you could flip maybe a Palmer in there for Carr, just based on the fact that Nebraska at the moment trending towards NCAA tournament team. That's good. Again, I guess Penn State's 500 in the league, so you really can't say that, they're completely out of the discussion, or that Tony Carr is just dropping a ton of points on everybody for a bad team. Like, that's not necessarily the case. So I think the Jordan Murphy one is interesting to me because I'm not real sure how much he's changed as a player overall, as much as the circumstances around him have changed with guys getting hurt, guys leaving the team. So it's almost like, okay, your numbers aren't as astronomically good as they were before the year, but you're still double guy, 17 and whatever, and offensive rebounding machine. I almost don't want to discredit, or I want to give him extra credit for continuing to like essentially put up really, really good numbers when it's gotten harder to do that because he just doesn't have the help around him at all. I mean, still 17-7, 11-7 rebounds, shooting 54% from the field. It's hard for me I don't know that I put him up there. I think he will essentially be dragged down by the team struggling, but I don't also know that he's that much different of a guy than he was in November and December when everybody, like you said, thought he was like all-American Jordan Murphy.
Yeah, and I was someone that I think kind of poured water a little bit on that just because, he's relatively efficient, not like an elite level defender, a good offensive rebounder that creates opportunities, but doesn't really stretch it out at all like the other guys on this team do. I think everyone on this team is above 37-ish% from three. Keita Bates-Diop, Vince Edwards,
right?
Jordan Miles Bridges, particularly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's easier to build teams around those guys than it is to build a team around Jordan Murphy's talent. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that might be also sort of proof positive by what's happening with Minnesota.
That's a great point.
You don't have Reggie Lynch in there. You've missed Amir Coffey for fairly significant amounts of time, or at least somewhat significant amounts of time. And Jordan Murphy hasn't been able to carry you. We thought this was maybe a top 4 team in the league, championship contender in the league. And when it was left up to him, Nate Mason, a couple other guys, just didn't happen. So, that could very well be, that could be the case in point. Juwan Morgan to me, I don't know. I almost give him extra credit too, just for carrying Indiana, which has less than a lot of teams. And he's been really good against really good teams. So,
yeah,
but I wouldn't put him up. I wouldn't put him up there again just because of the team stuff. So
yeah, Morgan was my 6th. Ultimately, I decided to reward both of the Edwardses over him just because of the team success. But I think Juwan Morgan has been incredible this year. I mean, the guy is a 30 PER. He's averaging 17.7 rebounds, 59% from the field on an Indiana team that's really struggling. So another few names that I just want to mention, Moritz Wagner has been pretty solid this year. I think you could easily toss him on one of the lower teams. You could toss Nick Ward onto one of those teams probably. Josh Reeves has been really, really good. Ethan Happ, I don't think I've mentioned Ethan Happ, but 17 points, 8 rebounds. He's done well this year despite their struggles. Anthony Cowan has kept Maryland afloat. Kevin Horter as well has kept Maryland afloat. And it's just a deep league in terms of actual talent in comparison to teams, which makes you wonder, why is the Big Ten struggling as much as it is?
Well, that's sort of like, that was sort of the Northwestern question that I would go back and forth with, just from a team perspective of, how do you judge Northwestern's season so far when they've got all their guys back? And I know Chris Collins was very sarcastic last night after the game with everybody saying that it's a disaster that they're where they are, but we expected more. There's no doubt about it. And how do you judge that? It's, they're struggling the way they are in a Big Ten that isn't even that good. But part of the reason the Big Ten isn't that good is because they're struggling. So it's kind of like, it's a little chicken and the egg. Like, okay, all these guys are putting up decent numbers. They're carrying these teams, but they're also kind of putting up decent numbers and carrying teams in a league that isn't all that great. So, I don't know that I would say that the Big Ten's talent is deep. I think there are guys that are producing nicely for teams in this league, but the teams would be better overall, I think, or we'd see they'd seem to be better if the talent was actually a ton better. Like, you can put up 14 a game in the Big Ten, you might not even be all that amazing a college basketball player this year, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Or you can put up 14 in the Big Ten and be Dakota Mathias, who I think is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, you could be a super valuable guy. I mean, that's the kind of guy that, I've written about him, so I'm a little biased, but that's the kind of guy who you get to the NCAA tournament is just going to annoy the living crap out of some other team, and they're not going to have seen anybody like him all year. And that could be enough. That could be enough to throw a team off.
Yeah.
And it's just this Dakota Mathias, who's like 30th in the league in scoring. It might be like, he winds up being one of your key guys to a team making an Elite Eight Final Four run.
What league do you want to move to next, Brian?
What league haven't we done? Let's do. Let's see. Let's go to the SEC, with which I am only sort of passingly familiar. But let's do SEC next.
This was a really hard one. I think that there are because
the league's awesome, like much better than it has been anyway. Yeah,
it's not even that it's awesome, but it is. It's that there are so many teams and so many players that are close to each other that I think you can make a case for like 15 dudes. So my team here, I have Colin Sexton. I think he's the only one that you kind of actually, no, I will rephrase. I have Colin Sexton and Bryce Brown from Auburn. I think those are the two that you absolutely need. My third, fourth, and fifth, Yonte Maton at Georgia, who I think is just awesome, leading the league in scoring, if I remember correctly, outside of Colin Sexton. Jalen Barford has been really good this year at Arkansas. He's taken that next step to where I think that he's going to get looks from NBA teams. My fifth is Grant Williams, who plays for Tennessee, really, really solid, undersized forward who I think is kind of carrying them at this stage right now. I mean, I know that they have a lot of guys like Bowden and Bone and, even Kyle Alexander provides size inside, but I love what Grant Williams does. And this now has me leaving off Jalen Hudson,
right?
Tyler Davis, Daryl Macon, who is Barford's teammate at Arkansas, Mustafa Heron, who I think has been really, really good this year. Cassius Robertson, what he's done at Missouri to carry that team back to the brink of the NCAA tournament has been really, really impressive. Tremont Waters has had a great year. All of the Kentucky players. I don't have a Kentucky player on this list right now. Daniel Gafford, I think, is going to be a top 20 pick in the NBA draft, and he's not here. Chris Silva has a 25.7 PER right now, and he's carrying South Carolina to a winning record when nobody thought that they could get there. This is a loaded league right now, and it's hard to just narrow it down to five. But like I said, I think my five right now, Sexton, Bryce Brown, Yonte Maton, Jalen Barford, Grant Williams.
I think Maton's going to get it, even if Georgia slides or continues to slide or whatever. I think the one trade that would be made would be Heron for Barford. And I strictly in terms of Auburn being so unexpectedly good, given everything they've gone through. I think there you'll see a reward, and maybe even with a Jalen Hudson, maybe putting him up there too. I'm not sure exactly who for, but like two teams that are right near the top, although Florida is 3 games, I guess, behind Auburn here in the loss column. But Heron, I think, is the one that's going to would be moved up just because, I mean, look, no one expected Auburn to do this. Are they the only team that's really I guess Arizona obviously is thriving as well, despite the FBI stuff at the beginning of the year and USC starting to come around a little bit. But I mean, for Auburn to be doing what they're doing, for Auburn to be, 1 or 2 seed contention at this point in the league that obviously everybody thinks is pretty good. I think he's probably going to get slid up there. I mean, Jalen Barford's averaging a lot of points for a team that's not even 500 in the league. So,
yeah, I think that's fair. I will say that right now there are only 2 teams that have fewer than 4 losses in this league. Right. Like
a lot of Barford beat them up. They're beating themselves up. Yep.
Right. Like Arkansas is 5-6 right now. Florida's 6-4. Like, it's not like there's a huge difference there. It's a hard league, man. Like, I don't really have a problem with anyone saying, no, you're wrong on this one.
Yeah.
This is a tough league to vote for, I think. And like I said, we just brushed over Cassius Robertson. I'm sorry. He's been unbelievable. Quindry Weatherspoon has Mississippi State. He's leading them to a winning record in the league right now that I didn't expect. This is a really, really tough league.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because you have a lot of players who are doing well on teams that are in that sort of
middle
500 middling miasma, right? Like teams that are just sort of all the same, and the guys aren't so spectacularly great. What I think is interesting about Robertson, and this just popped into my head, like do Missouri guys get somehow subconsciously downgraded because their performances wouldn't be that good if Michael Porter Jr. was playing? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, Cassius Robertson probably isn't averaging 16 a game if Michael Porter Jr. is on for. Now, granted, I get it. We have to judge what they've done. We have to, judge what's out there on the court, and that's what I would do if I was voting for an all-SEC team, which I do not have to do. But I wonder if there will be like some sort of tinge of subconscious downgrading. Like, yeah, but would you really be that good if Michael Porter Jr. was on the floor with you right now? It's sort of that weird tiebreaker that no one really even talk about.
Well, I don't even think it's good. I think it's, would you be producing as much? Right. Like, who's to say that Cassius Robertson wouldn't be averaging, let's say, 12 points a night while shooting 45% on 4 threes a game that are more open because of Michael Porter Jr. Just attracting so much more attention on the floor. I mean, to me, the fact that we're talking about Cassius Robertson here for this is remarkable. Like, he was at Canisius last year. It's a super cool story that, we're at the point where this guy is legit. This guy has been a really, absolutely terrific player that is deserving of these accolades.
Yeah. And we also glazed over the fact that, like you mentioned, we don't have anybody from Kentucky on this first team. I think sort of deservedly so. And I think what that's most emblematic of is that who on Kentucky has seized moments on a consistent basis this season? No one really. Yeah. I mean, no one's really just sort of, for that team, grabbed it by the throat on a consistent basis and driven them. Like, you've got some guys who have done it some nights to a very high level, Kevin Knox, Diallo, but like not on a real regular basis. And if they're in that muddle, and I think you get down with the fact that there's just no real alpha that's emerged. Who are you gonna give a nod to? Who are you gonna say separates himself from his own pack on his own team to be worthy of that? They'll get like probably 1 or 2 guys, I assume, on a second or third team. That's how it probably go right now. But it's sort of emblematic that just no one has really seized the moment on a consistent basis for Kentucky. You don't even really think to put them in the top 5 right now based on that.
Yeah, like I would have Kevin Knox on my second team.
Yep,
right
probably.
Now. I do think he's been really good this year. Shea Alexander, I might have like on a third team if I was really, deciding, hey, Kentucky, they go 10-8, 11-7 in the league. That's a pretty solid finish for them, given how tough it's been. I think it'd be fair to put Shea on that team, but this league is tough. It's a deep league. It's a tough league. And I want to reward some of the guys that have been incredibly productive in situations that have been difficult for them this year. And I think that your pick of Mustafa Heron is a fair one, given that criteria.
All right. Moving on.
So let's move on to the Big 12. I think the Big 12 is actually kind of easy. It might have been the easiest time I had picking a 5.
Yeah, I couldn't. When I looked this over, I couldn't really gin up a good argument for probably any of the other 5. I mean, there might be 6, and then you might, even the 6 is even a flimsy one. But go ahead. Who do you have?
So I've got Devontae Graham, Trae Young, Javon Carter, Keenan Evans, and Mohamed Bamba.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like a Barry Brown you sneak in there, maybe, possibly, but I don't really see a whole lot of variation in that. I mean, this has been. It's a really good league with a very competitive league, but besides, I could maybe argue Barry Brown with you, but I don't know over who. I don't take a Bamba off there, probably not. And the other guards are so good and so important to their teams, and just guys who are going to be playing at an extremely high level. Like I don't know that I could really argue to slide anybody else in there.
Yeah, after the Baylor game, I probably would have had Barry Brown in that 5th spot, which is something that's super cool. It's 5 point guards, basically, or 5 lead guards on the all-conference team, which is something I personally don't have a problem with. Some people want to be able to field a team, right? Like that would actually be able to make sense on a floor. I just go with the 5 best guys. Over his last 3 games, though, Barry Brown, 2 for 9 against Georgia, 9 points. 4 for 16 against Kansas, 9 points. 0 for 3 with 6 turnovers against West Virginia, 1 point.
Right.
So I've knocked him down for now to the second team. I also think Dean Wade would have a very, possible discussion over Mohamed Bamba. But Bamba, I mean, has just been unbelievable over the course of the last couple of months. He's the most effective defensive player in the league, even though he weighs like 225 pounds. Sagaba Konate for West Virginia, I think, is also an incredibly good defender, but he just doesn't cover ground like Mohamed Bamba does. I mean, like Trae Young, Keenan Evans, Javon Carter, and Devontae Graham, there's not really an argument for those guys.
No.
If you had to put the final 3, though, so Carter, Evans, and Graham in order, what order would you put them?
Carter, Evans, and Graham. Interesting. I probably would go Carter, Evans, Graham. I would think. And again, like I'm leaning towards success. But the thing with Devontae Graham is that his numbers were not great to start the year. So it's almost like he's probably, he is playing a lot better. And his numbers, if he had just sort of been at his normal Devontae Grahamness, would even be like better than they are. But I don't know. I mean, again, like maybe I'm a sucker for teams that aren't Kansas that are like, that are competing. And that's nothing against Kansas. I don't have any bias against Kansas or anything like that. I mean, I'm just wondering if like maybe, okay, let's give credit to Texas Tech and West Virginia and especially Texas Tech for kind of like ushering itself to the upper echelon of the Big 12 seemingly out of nowhere. And even though Kansas doesn't have as much as it has had in the past, even though it's got like glaring holes and glaring depth issues, and Devontae Graham is carrying through. And I may be talking myself into putting Devontae Graham up top right now as we speak.
Yeah.
But I think even maybe Keenan Evans, if I flip anything, it would be maybe Keenan Evans and then Carter and then Graham, or Graham and Carter. Yeah, I don't even know what I'm saying right now. I think I've like completely lost myself. You've got me Finkel and Einhorning myself, just like going back and forth here.
These guys could go in any order, I think, is the fun part of this conversation. It's just, they're all so good. They're all so talented. They all affect the game in a totally different way. Graham is more of your true distributor who can also knock down shots from the outside. Evans is more of a constant attacking scoring guard. Javon Carter is your two-way dominant defensive player who's also averaging like 17-5-5 or 17-7-5 or something like that. It's a fun discussion to me. I really have enjoyed watching all 4 of the Big 12 point guards this year play. I don't know that we need to get into a full stop Trae Young discussion though, right?
No, I think he's pretty good and it's pretty exhaustively discussed so far. He's good. He deserves his first team all Big 12 spot. We'll leave it at that. So, yes.
I can't handle the hot takes on this podcast with you saying Trae Young is good. What are you?
I know.
Unbelievable. Let's move on. Let's talk about the ACC. The ACC is tough because I have not been a huge fan of this league this year. Okay. I think it's a little bit down in comparison, at least to what it's been in the past. Probably.
Has a lot to do, I think, with the normal top teams. You think I had this discussion with another coach today actually about how people maybe are overreacting a little bit too much to powerhouse teams losing, both based on the fact that teams lose before they get to March. Like, we don't see a whole lot of undefeated teams make it all the way to March. And if top teams or teams that you expect to be really good lose, maybe we shouldn't sort of freak out about it as much, because if a team loses a game on the road, well, maybe they're going to be like 28-4 as opposed to 29-3 going into March. And what's the difference? But, North Carolina's not played up to a level that you thought it would. Notre Dame, because of injury issues, dragged down. I mean, Notre Dame probably is a upper echelon, really good team. Miami probably hasn't been quite as good as everybody thought they maybe could be. And then like Duke having taken a couple more losses, like Duke losing to St. John's, like that's fairly ridiculous. Like that shouldn't happen. But they're not that they have their issues. They're super exposed to their issues. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, so I think there's a lot of teams that are performing slightly below expectation, and it's created its own muddle in the ACC right now.
So here are my three we'll start with. I've got Marvin Bagley, I've got Luke May, and I've got Jerome Robinson from Boston College. Jerome Robinson is averaging 20 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds a game, has about 50% from the field, 47% from 3, 85% from the foul line. To me, he is probably the best guard in the entire league. How Boston College ended up with the best guard in the entire league is another discussion, and I think it's a really cool story. But that's where I'm at with them. The next two that I've got, I have Tyus Battle from Syracuse, and I've got Marquise Reed from Clemson.
Interesting. I don't know how you don't have a Virginia guy on it. I don't. I mean,
yeah, that gets tough for me.
I hear you, but Kyle Guy is right there in terms of like one of the top 10 scorers in the league. And everyone on Virginia plays good defense. He plays good defense. He's not the best. He's not the most impactful defender on that team by a lot of measures. And he's not that great. He's not that spectacularly great a shooter, at least by the raw numbers anyway. Good 3-point shooter, obviously, and that they're going to need that at some point in time. I can see you make an argument for a Battle. I can see you make an argument for a Robinson. I don't know how, in any reality that we have discovered as humans yet, they're not going to have one Virginia player on a first-team All-ACC team. Now, I may be arguing just like what voters are going to do versus what should happen, but I also think that if your team's like, 3 games ahead of the pack and has lost once all year, probably there's someone on your team who's deserving of a first-team All-ACC spot.
So, yeah, Kyle Guy, I had 6th.
Right.
My problem with Kyle Guy is Kyle Guy for sure the best player on Virginia?
That's a really good question, because I actually started, when I was looking through this, I was like, can you make an argument for Isaiah Wilkins? Do you make an argument that he is the most valuable guy on that team?
I think you can make a case that Devin Hall is the most valuable player on that team, given his two-way play. It's a really, really tough conversation to have. I'm not entirely sure where I fall on it, but I think that's ultimately why I decided to just leave them off, was I didn't want to pick one. You know what I mean?
I bet whoever if there is any separation over the last few games, if Devin Hall has a good stretch down the stretch, it stands out down the stretch, or if Kyle Guy stands out down the stretch, I bet it's one of those two guys.
Yeah. You
know what I mean? Like, I think, Kyle Guy's going to have the ball in his hands more, usually does. But you're right. I mean, Devin Hall, I'm better shooting numbers, gives you better more defender on the rebound, gives you more rebounding, gives you more ball distribution. I mean, he does a lot more for that team in a lot of ways than Kyle Guy does. But he's also averaging like 12 a game. So can you, our voters going to be able to just sort of look past that, understand the multiplicity of what he does for like the second bet, currently the number 2 team in the country. It's a real fascinating story. I bet a big game or two by one of these guys down the stretch sort of just puts them on there. And even guys who may have more raw talent are just going to have to step aside because of the way the team has performed.
Yeah, like for me, I think Isaiah Wilkins is probably the most important player on that team. I think that Hall is probably the best two-way player, and I think that Guy is the best offensive weapon. I can't pick one. I don't think, though, the voters will have Isaiah Wilkins, because I don't think they'll be able to get over 6 points a game.
Correct. Right. That's what Defensive Player of the Year awards are for, or whatever. So,
Yeah. I mean, I wrote in the thing I wrote on Virginia today that I think the NABC should give him a significant look when voting for National Defensive Player of the Year. He is unbelievable, I think, on that end. He has just been totally ridiculous. 7% block rate, 3% steal rate. That has been done, I want to say, by 11 players in high major leagues over the course of the last 9 years. So very rare for him to be doing that. And it honestly, reducing him to steals and blocks doesn't take into account 90% of what he does defensively. So it's a tough league, and no Grayson Allen, no Theo Pinson, who I think has been okay for UNC, no Joel Berry, who's a 2-time, all Final Four team, basically. No Kai Bowman, no Temple Gibbs, who has somehow carried Notre Dame during these moments of injury. I went with Marquise Reed just because I like the way he plays on both ends. I like the fact that he can really shoot it. 16 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists is a really, really good season. And I think that he's a big reason why Clemson is sitting pretty solidly at number 2 in this league.
Yeah, I don't mind that pick at all. I mean, I think you have to, again, sound like a beating the same drum here over and over again. But I mean, if you're like, second or third place in your league and you have a player who, like you said, is performing, producing all, in a lot of different ways, and there honestly just isn't that much separation between that guy and, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in terms of your top players in the league, then I think you reward that guy with a spot on the first team. I do. And right now, I mean, if you're Clemson, you're in second place, half game ahead of Duke. Like you put Marquise on the team for now, and then we'll see how it plays out at the end. But I think he's deserving.
Still playing well without Dante Grantham as well, who is now out with injury. It's an impressive season that Marquise Reed has had. Real quick, let's go to the Pac-12. DeAndre Ayton, I think, is the pretty clear player of the year.
What?
I've got, yeah, shocking, I know. I have got Reed Travis, Aaron Holiday, Alonzo Trier, and then the 5th spot was really tough. I wanted to give it to Trey Holder. I did not, and instead gave it to Noah Dickerson to reward how good Washington has been in the league. Okay.
Interesting. I don't think that's how that will happen.
Neither do I.
Yeah. I mean, you're not even like the leading scorer on your own team overall. I mean, but I get it. He does a lot of stuff. I mean, he's nearly a double guy, shooting great, about 57% from the field. I have a hard time thinking that like people are going to look past the numbers that the Arizona State guys are putting up, unless like the bottom continues to fall out. I mean, I will say this. So Arizona State gets Arizona next week. Arizona's got the LA. I think it's the Arizona and the LA schools playing this weekend in Arizona, and next week's Arizona State. I would say that if you don't get a statement game from Arizona State in Tempe against the Wildcats, like if Arizona goes in there and either stomps them or pulls off another win, I could see people really just sort of fleeing the Sun Devils, bandwagon if they haven't already. At that point, maybe all bets are off. At that point, maybe a Noah Dickerson is up there, because then it becomes how hollow are these numbers that the ASU guys are putting up? Like they were great. Yeah. And we were down there for the big Arizona State showdown in December, but it just doesn't look like the same team. So then I actually in that case, I could see a guy like a Dickerson kind of sneaking back up there for sure.
So yeah, conference numbers here. Trey Holder has put up 16.6 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists a game on 39% shooting from the field. And a 53.8 true shooting percentage, which is about a 1.5% to 2% below the national average. Noah Dickerson, on the other hand, 14.5 points per game in league, 8.3 rebounds, shooting 52% from the field, 58% true shooting percentage. Has been a big part of why they are able to do what they do on that end. I mean, having talked to Pac-12 coaches, they're more worried about Noah Dickerson's energy levels than they are about Jalen Noel's scoring or Matisse Thybulle's defense. Dickerson's the one that I think has been really, really good, even though he doesn't necessarily get the publicity of the others. I mean, again, it's hard to leave off a guy like a Chimezie Metu at
question.
USC.
Yeah, that was my next question, is that granted, USC and Washington are about the same. I mean, it's a half game separation of them right now. I mean, they literally are separated by a half game for like both the season and in conference play. But what is the difference to you between a Dickerson, between a Metu, maybe to a lesser extent a Boatwright? I mean, because this is essentially the same level of success for these teams right now. Like, and I can see a Thomas Welsh, even though he's a double-double guy, not being on that first team because Aaron Holiday is doing what he's doing. But, Metu and Boatwright are your two frontline guys for USC, at least statistically. What is the tiebreaker for you with the Dickerson and those guys?
Benny Boatwright, I don't think should be sniffing this team, to be honest.
Metu's right there, though.
Metu is right there. Metu would have been within that. He's within the 4 to 6 range, right? Or the 5 to 6 range in this league, right? Or 5-7, I guess, between Dickerson, Trey Holder, and Metu. Those are the three guys that I really looked at for the 5th spot. To me, I just think coaches worry a little bit more about the energy level that Noah Dickerson brings. Their numbers aren't terribly different. Metu averages a half point more per game. Dickerson averages a half rebound more per game. They shoot about the same from the field. I think Dickerson's probably a little bit better positionally defensively, particularly in that zone. I think that he's, like I said, his energy levels on the offensive glass just cause coaches more nightmares than what Chimezie Metu is going to bring every night. I think Chimezie Metu is a better pro prospect, to be sure. He's starting to knock down threes. He's incredibly athletic, 6'11", can actually take guys off the dribble now. He can create his shot in a way that Dickerson really is reliant on chasing offensive rebounds for. But at the end of the day, I think that I'd go Dickerson just because I really like what they do. And another thing with Metu is I don't know that he's the best player on their team. I think Jordan McLaughlin might be the best player on their team.
Okay. Sure.
So,
yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'd argue with any of the other 4 guys, though.
Yeah.
Trier Ayton, Travis Holiday. I mean, those guys seem like slam dunks.
Yeah, Holiday's been great. Trier is averaging about 20 points a game. I mean, DeAndre Ayton is
just going to he might get better. I mean, it's just, who knows with that guy? Who knows what's going to happen next? I mean, he's just like an anomaly. He's like not from this planet.
No, he is not from this
I'm pretty sure.
No, he can't be from this planet. Last league we're going to go over the American League. Tougher league to pick than I thought it would be. I went with Gary Clark as my player of the year in the league. So far, at least. I went with Rob Gray out of Houston.
Yep.
I went with Melvin Frazier out of Tulane. I went with Landry Shamet, and I went with Shake Milton.
I don't have a lot of problem with that.
Yeah.
I was going to fight you if you didn't have Gary Clark on the first team.
Oh no.
I mean, I was there. We would have somehow come to verbal podcast blows over Gary Clark, but no, I mean, he is to me one of the most underratedly valuable guys in the country.
Yep.
Period. I mean, PR off the charts, win shares off the charts, doesn't turn the ball over, even though the ball is in his hands a decent amount of time relative to everybody else who's in the rotation, kills you on the glass, plays good deep. I mean, when he's out there, his plus minus is like the top of the country, if not at the top. Like, it's 12.9 points, 8.9 rebounds a game is not going to jump off the page at anybody. But for what that team does and what that team needs and who that team is and what they've done so far, he is underratedly one of the most valuable players in the country, period.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. They are just really unbelievable with him on the floor. There's not really another way to put it. He's college basketball's Draymond Green, I think, is the best way to put it. He just does every single little thing on the basketball floor that his team needs to win. He's a great passer. He's, as you mentioned, incredibly efficient with his decision making. He's now capable of hitting 3-pointers in games. Like, there's just nothing to complain about with Gary Clark. He has a complete offensive game and a complete defensive game. Guys that I felt bad leaving off, Jeremiah Martin at Memphis has been really good, but I just didn't want to put anyone from Memphis on the team. Jalen Adams, basically ditto for Connecticut. Didn't really want to put anyone from Connecticut on the team. Quentin Rose from Temple, I think, is really, really good. Obi Anechionia from Temple is really, really good, but again, didn't really want to reward Temple for what's been a bit of a struggle for them in conference play. The last guy is Jacob Evans at Cincinnati, who I think, again, much like Gary Clark and much due to the fact that they play such a defensive style, is one of the most underrated players in the country, averaging 14 points on 46% from the field, 41% from three, 80% from the foul line. 4 rebounds, 3 assists, can initiate offense, can play off the ball, really good defender on the perimeter, kind of does everything for them as well on the wing. Just a little bit less valuable, I think, than what Gary Clark brings, and just a little bit less valuable than the other guys on this list.
Yeah, and I might even put Evans up closer to that top 5. Like, I wouldn't have him in my top 5, but some of those other guys you mentioned, like the emptiness of some of those numbers for those other guys in terms of how you help your team win and all that stuff. I mean, it's like it's amazing. I'm looking at the numbers right now. Like, Connecticut has 3 of the Americans' top 12 scorers, and they're just not good,
right?
Like, as a team. I mean, it's sort of this league of like empty numbers, basically. Guys like putting up performances that just really aren't helping their teams make any hay whatsoever. Right. I mean, so it's almost it's almost that league where you really do need to look beyond raw numbers as much as any other league to find out who the real valuable guys are. I'd have Jacob Evans like nearing first team status at this point.
I mean,
not there. I don't have a problem with the other 5, but right there.
I mean, it's possible that I'm overrating Melvin Frazier's NBA potential at the expense of what he's actually bringing to this league too. You know what I mean? Like 16 points, one of the best defenders in the league, pretty good passer now, grabs rebounds, kind of does it all for them. But, Tulane's 4 and 6 in the league. They're not incredible by any stretch of the imagination. They are going to have to make sure and bear down at the end of the year. Otherwise, they might not end up with a winning record in total throughout the course of the year. So I would get it if you would put Jacob Evans over him. I don't think that's a bad selection. I just really like Melvin Frazier.
That's fine. I mean, and the guys like Jure Foster, same thing, having a good year. The team's 500 in the league. Shake is obviously the guy there, and I'm not really sure that you could make an argument for Jure Foster over like a Jacob Evans based on team performance, but SMU's a little better. Again, his numbers are good for a team that's upper echelon of this league, which I guess maybe is still in that muddle beyond Cincinnati, Wichita State, and Houston to some degree. But
I think that you could probably make a case for him right now at this stage. I just figured there's no way that he's going to be on the final team because he's hurt. So, whatever. I'm just going to kind of go with what I got here.
I like that 5. I mean, I think it's fairly clear cut, and a lot of guys with good numbers in the league are just kind of, there's an emptiness behind them.
All right, Brian, I'm glad we got to #embrace debate today on this episode. Tell the people what you've got coming up. Tell the people what you have written this week, and tell them anything they just really need to know.
Yeah, y'all should check out the story on the Grand Canyon Antelopes, currently live at the Field House, visited with Thunder Dan Marley, and the equivalent of a college basketball startup. It is the first year that Grand Canyon is eligible to make the NCAA tournament, and they are poised to get that first bid ever in the history of the program on their first try. Of course, there's New Mexico State to deal with in the WAC, but it's an incredible story. I think it's just a fascinating story of a place that by sheer will and lots of resources has just decided to create its place in college basketball instead of trying to find its place. It just basically spent a lot of money to create its place. But it's a fun place to watch a game. They're really good defensively. That's a top 25 team in the country defensively. They've got some offensive issues, but they could be a team that makes the NCAA tournament for the first time ever on their first try ever. Now they're eligible after transitioning from Division II. So I would check that out. There might be another story from the great state of Arizona coming next week, but so I'll leave that as a teaser.
You know what the scary thing is about Grand Canyon? They're like recruiting the hell out of Europe too, and they have a lot of really good dudes
guys overseas.
Yeah, like Thunder Dan has found the market inefficiency. Guys like Alessandro Lever, Robert Bloomberg's was unbelievable this summer in youth competitions. They have the Finnish kid. Is it Fifi Adu? Something like that?
I would not want to be a WAC team recruiting against Grand Canyon with Grand Canyon having made an NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you right now, their practice gym, their practice facility, which, by the way, they built in 8 months, is as good or better than any other practice facility I've seen in the country. There's walking into that gym, it's like you're walking into like an NBA practice facility gym or the highest level of a college basketball practice gym. There are coaches across the country who would die to have that sort of resources at their hands, and Grand Canyon has it. I would not want to be a WAC team recruiting against Grand Canyon based on what Grand Canyon can walk recruits into and show them what they will have. Like blue skies and great weather in the winter and awesome facilities in the WAC. I wouldn't want to recruit against that in that league.
Yeah. I mean, the craziest, I think, stat in the WAC over the course of the last 2 years. Currently, the WAC has 2 top 25 defenses in the country. New Mexico State is sitting at 8th defensively in the country, which is bananas. And then Cal State Bakersfield last year also had a top 20 defense in the country. I don't know what's going on in the WAC that they're building these incredible defenses, but it's just crazy that this is what the league has come to. On my end, you're going to have a top 100 board for the NBA draft on Thursday when this podcast is released. Go check that out on The Athletic and on the Fieldhouse. Already this week, I've written about Isaac Haas and how he's the centerpiece of Purdue's attack and how Virginia has legitimately possibly the best defense over the last 2 decades in college basketball. So go check those out. We'll be back on Sunday/Monday with just kind of a recap over what happened in the weekend of action in college basketball. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll talk soon. Bye.